Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
Welcome to Launch Code. So this is our second episode with Mark Geist. We also have Baker Leavitt. Welcome back to the show, Mark. Thanks a lot for coming out.
Hey, Evan, thank you for having me. Last time we didn't get to do it in person, so now we're here in Las Vegas at SHOT Show.
Man, the SHOT Show.
We're actually at the porn convention. We're not at SHOT Show.
Man,
Mark was at the concrete convention. Evan and I are here for the porn show.
Right. So, Mark, how many of these have you gone to? SHOT Show.
I think I never went to a SHOT Show or came out to SHOT Show before Benghazi because I was always deployed.
Yeah,
seemed like I was always deployed in that time, and if I was home, I really just couldn't justify. Hey, honey, I just got home.
Right.
I'm going to go out to Vegas for a week. That didn't really go over very well. So
right.
This is my fifth. Trip to SHOT Show. It's been 6 years, but I think the first SHOT Show was January. I missed January of 2013 because I think I was still recovering from some of the things.
Yeah, the things. I think I started coming out in. The first one was like 04, and then I would schedule trips
Based
around SHOT. Yeah.
A lot of guys did.
Yeah.
A lot of guys did. I worked for Denny. He was Navy SEAL. He was plank holder for SEAL Team 6.
Yeah. Chalker.
Yep, Dennis Chalker.
Mm-hmm.
Call sign Snake.
Yep.
And he's always, and everybody always talks about that. Him and a lot of the guys always scheduled that, and I'm like, okay, I'll cover the time when you're gone. So
right,
but
yeah, Denny was like a legend in the teams because he had like a lot of experience before people knew him, like across the community, because he also had like slings and a bunch of other stuff that he was doing. Mm-hmm. I had a Chalker sling for a long time.
I love that thing.
Yeah, it was great. It had that pull tab with a brass. It was like a brass bail that you could.
You know where that
release.
That comes from? It's a sailing clip.
Yeah, exactly.
And which kind of goes back to his naval heritage,
right,
so to speak. But
I loved that thing. Like I used to use that like exclusively. And when we went to I don't know, like some other stupid clip or whatever it was, but I kept that brass pull tab ring forever on my gear.
I really liked it when they had the single, because the first one came out, it was kind of like a H harness that you had to put on. Then he designed the one that just would fit into your Molly gear.
That's the one that I had.
And that's the one I
perfect.
had.
Yeah.
Then I'd have I built I call it a weapons catch out of a coat hanger. And I'd tape it to my duty belt.
Right.
And it was kind of in an S. Mm-hmm. So it would tape to the duty belt, and then I had duct tape around it.
Right.
And so I could, if I was climbing something or going over it, I'd just take my gun and I'd take my weapon and just hook it back into there, and it would just kind of hook. And so it's sitting there on your side, so you could climb over a wall, you could reach down, and if I had to pick somebody up that was injured, and it puts your weapon in an area that was completely safe, and it's not going to be dangling in front of you, getting in the way. And then somebody finally came out with one that was actually made that way.
Yeah.
And put some design into it instead of just took a coat hanger and wrapped it around.
Yeah, I had the. That's exactly what I did. I took the. It was called a breacher stow, right? So you could stow your shotgun and in your kit, and so I just kept that thing, and that's exactly what I did. Same thing, same saying. Look at that, twinsies.
I don't have any stories like that to share.
No, I know you don't, Baker. But Baker is the civilian on the panel, and he'll be able to bring a few things to the table when it comes to questions. So
make sure that you guys when you guys say things that most people listening have no clue what you're talking about, I will stop and ask you, hey, what does that mean? So when you start using 3-letter words and shit that no one understands them, I'll be like, hey, so what does that stand for?
It's an ATLA.
Exactly, whatever the hell that means. But
another 3-letter acronym.
Yeah.
It's a 3-letter acronym for another 3-letter acronym.
That just went over my head, but I caught it on the second go-around. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mark, who you out here with? Who?
I didn't come out with anybody this year.
Really?
Yeah, I just chose to come out and try to just enjoy it from a spectator standpoint.
Right. So, have you had a chance to walk the floor and check shit out?
I have. I've been up and down for the last 2.5, 3 days now, going on 3 days.
When you brought your dog out too, right?
Well, so I've been working with Special Operations Wounded Warrior, and they've been helping with them on the dog.
Okay. Yeah.
Can't really go too far into all of that because it's not official or anything.
Got
like
it.
that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and wonderful dog, by the way.
It is. I mean, Special Operations Wounded Warriors is based out of Myrtle Beach.
Oh yeah.
And what they do is they want to, I guess the way they put it is, the military trains veterans to go out and, take the fight to the enemy. They give them a sword. They take you out and they want you to use that sword. It gives you a purpose. They give you a purpose. And when you get out, a lot of guys lose that purpose because the sword's taken away, so to speak.
Right.
And a lot of guys struggle with that and not having that sense of belonging to that thing bigger than themselves. And so they've found that through the canine program that they've developed, giving these guys a canine, giving them something, one, to love, be responsible for, they have to care for, but also then continuing that training so they can then train that dog, whether it be in search and rescue, in narcotics, be bomb detection, and then you've got somebody who has the background that most of the Spec Ops guys have, but also can help the law enforcement or the community with an animal that's highly trained, but gives them a purpose again, gives them a chance to be part of something bigger than what they are themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you think that that's maybe one of the reasons why a lot of combat arms guys, I would say, or military guys are continuing their recreational shooting and their desire to purchase a lot of guns? Do you think it's partly to maintain some continuity to their past?
I think it is, and so a buddy of mine I worked with on a contract, we were training Iraqi SWAT teams and emergency response units, 5, 6, 7, 8, and he's a former Navy SEAL, and he came out with me this year. He's from Colorado, and he was talking about that. This is the time when you get to run into guys that you haven't seen in a long time. Yeah. And you get to bring that camaraderie that, I don't know how many guys he's ran into or I've ran into. I'm sure you have yourself. And a lot, he's not even a known guy other than within this industry. Right. But, and I think this is one of those things that helps kind of the same way, is it brings you together and gives you that camaraderie that you miss from being in the military and in that kind of unit.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. It's funny because I was down at the bar downstairs, which is called the Circle Bar, the last couple nights. You run into guys, you're like, dude, I haven't seen this dude for 10 years or whatever it is. And it's not because you haven't texted him every now and again or whatever, but you have these mini reunions almost. Yeah. And we're walking down, going to our booth's on co-located with FN, and I got stopped by one of the guys that we used to work with, and then another guy came in, and then another guy came in, and pretty soon it's like, man, we're having a mini reunion here. There's 5 dudes that we haven't seen each other for 5-6 years, and then all of a sudden we're just piled up here in the center of this hall, and it's just, that's one of the really special things about SHOT Shows. You get to run into guys that you haven't seen forever that you really want to talk to. Some maybe you don't, but at the end of the day, it's good to say hey.
Well, and it's awesome that NSSF does this. Because they're really the sponsor of it that puts this whole thing together, and it's. I've seen it grow in just the last 4 times I've been here. Somebody like yourself or Denny Chalker, who's been here for coming to this thing for probably 10, 15 years. It's just grown and grown and grown, and it does. It gives you that chance to meet up with guys and just kind of reconnect. And it's not that we don't want to reconnect during the rest of the year.
Right.
But our lives are busy.
Yeah.
You know, you've gone from being a warrior to now you have to make sure you're taking care of business, taking care of family, and you got all these other responsibilities, and it's just hard to connect to the guys that you served with.
It is, and it's rare that you have the opportunity for several days in a row because you might be at an airport or something like that. And you're like, I'm flying through. But now it's like, hey, man, we got 4 days. At some point in time, we're going to be able to sit down for 15, 20 minutes and share a cup of coffee and shoot the shit. I saw a guy today that I haven't seen for probably 10 years. And I legitimately love the guy, but I just haven't seen the dude for 10 years. And we got to spend a half hour just shooting the shit, catching up. And that's one of the things I really love about SHOT Show. One, we get to see a ton of customers that, you know, we sell coffee to. And really the big one is coming here and seeing all the dudes that I haven't seen forever. And you know they're going to be here. Yeah. And then there's always those surprises. You're like, holy shit, man. Yeah. Yeah, what are you doing now?
But there's also, we were there the other night at the Circle Bar, and you ran into Austin.
Yeah, yeah.
And you told him something that I doubt you would ever say to someone during like time of conflict. And you said, you like, ask Troy who the best person he ever put through TDC maybe or something. I don't know what that is. Ask Troy who the best guy ever went through TDC was, and he'll tell you it was you. And that dude's fucking face, I don't know if you're fucking with him. I don't even know what the fuck any of that means.
Right.
But that dude's face lit up. And he was like, are you fucking, dude, he's like, man, you fucking with me? You serious? And you were like, no, man, ask Troy. He'll tell you the same thing I did. And that was kind of cool, man, because I don't think that you guys would say something like that to someone, like, you know, when someone's head to get too big or whatever, you know, or make anyone think they were better than anyone else. But that was interesting to watch you do that, because that guy, like, he lit up. He made that dude's day.
Well, he was an awesome dude, and I meant it. So, and we had talked about it, like, you remember Troy, obviously. Yep. And we had talked about it several times. We're like, oh, yeah, that dude, he was absolutely one of the best dudes that we put through.
It's not bad that I said that, is it? I mean, I don't know what that means. But
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean,
he's going to come knock on my door, but hey, man, you disclosed national secrets.
I don't think so.
It's typical military, you know, like training driver coordinator, TDC.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Put things in backwards. I mean, that's how that whole 3-letter acronym goes backwards. But
there's a lot of those things out there, and I think that we'll do a good job by moving on.
And now I'm nervous, and I feel Dave, edit all that shit I fucked up. I don't even know what I did, but I did something bad.
No. So what's going on, man? Like we just caught up, but you and I spent a huge percentage of our time like reliving Baghdad of like, you know, 06, 07, 08. But really, like we got to get to the nuts and bolts of what you're doing with, you know, your foundations that you're active in, because you're active across the board on a bunch of different ones.
You know, it's the first thing, you know, me and my wife started, and it was, and I don't even know where it came from. My wife always tells me, you know, I was laying in the hospital in Walter Reed, probably 5 days. Well, it had to be within 5 days, because she came out. Her and my daughter, my oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, came out and was with me for the first 7 days after I got back from Germany.
Right.
And I told them then, I don't like how things were for contractors, and there's nothing there for contractors. And so I'm like, I want to start a foundation. I want to start something.
Right.
Because I don't want anybody else to have to, their family to have to go through what mine went through. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because you know what? There was a lot of great people at the agency that helped out. I mean, you know, because as a contractor, again, kind of rehash it from our last one, but you know, as a private security contractor working for the U.S. government, your parachute, I guess, for no better word, is a workman's comp policy.
Right.
You know, and I went from making a 6-figure income. So on the 12th, when I got injured, I left Libya. So that was the last day I got paid, because the contract is I don't get paid unless my feet are touching ground in that country that I am contracted to work in.
Right.
So I'm in the hospital for the next 8 weeks or whatever it was, and I'm not getting paid. You have a workman's comp policy. You have to then go in and file all the paperwork and wait for them. And, as efficient as the government has become over the years, I mean, they get it to you rather slowly. I know that surprises everybody.
I know, that's super surprising because the government's really good at a bunch of stuff.
It is. And, and unfortunately, I mean, we've seen it all too much is, it's that whole analogy of, you fuck up, you move up.
Yeah.
So the best people are those that get injured, and the ones that are in charge are the ones that have probably made the most mistakes in life. And, the guy comes in, he was a Blue Badger, comes in and, because I called him up, I called him or texted him or sent him an email, and I'm like, hey, I need to get this started because I want to get it started because I know that I got to get paid because I've got bills coming up. I'm laying in the hospital in Walter Reed. I think at that time I'd probably been there about 5 days and had about 4 operations. So he's like, okay, I'll look in to see what I got to do. I don't know. I mean, it's like he should have had that already planned, but
right.
2 days later, he comes in, he hands me a packet of paperwork, and he says, hey, okay, you got to fill all this stuff out. I'm like, open it up, and there's like 7 pieces of paper from Department of Labor and all this. I'm like, okay, can I have your help because I can't write? He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I was left-handed before I got blown up, and now I don't have a left hand that works. He says, well, I can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it'd be a conflict of interest for me. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
You're on the same team, though, right? I mean, like, this is crazy.
Well, we are on the same team. We're on Team America.
Yeah, that's what I mean by that. Like,
yeah.
There's always going to be a conflict. I think I've said this before. There's always a conflict between the people that will put the mission first and will put me first. There's always a conflict. And unfortunately, the me's are the guys that get promoted.
Yeah, they do.
Me. That's all you hear. The mission first guys are the guys that don't get promoted. That's just the way it goes. They get passed up.
Because it's the difference, as he said, is IGM. I got mine.
Yep.
Or I've got yours. A good leader makes it about himself. A great leader makes it about his team. That's really the biggest difference. I mean, a great leader is making it about everybody else. And if I'm making it about everybody else, then a lot of times you're not the one getting promoted. You're making sure your guys get promoted, that get the best they can, the best schools, all of those things. And that's what it's about. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. But unfortunately, you always have that 10%.
And that 10%, and it represents, the guys that are continuing to, like he said, which is that conflict of interest really comes from the fact that there's some bureaucratic line in something that says you can't fill out paperwork for a subordinate, right? So they'll use that piece of, that one sentence somewhere that says, in this circumstance, meaning, yeah, of course, as a manager, you're not going to be able to fill this stuff out for somebody and or somebody that's a contractor. Yes, but hey, we have to make an exception in this case because it's logic. So Mark's referring to something that's like, he's using bureaucratic red tape in order to make sure that, 1, he covers his ass, and 2, because he probably didn't want to do it. He was just lazy.
Yeah, that's 100%. And unfortunately, that happens too often. I mean, and it was all of those things that just made me, I wanted to start something. I didn't want somebody else to have to deal with that. I didn't want somebody else's family to have to deal with that. So, I told my wife, I says, we need to start something to take care of this and fix this. And so we started Shadow Warriors Project. It took us about a year to get it off the ground. I had no idea what a 501c3 was. I mean, that was outside of my wheelhouse, but I had some people who helped out, got everything started up, and and that's what our job is now. Is we take care of the families and the individuals who are private security contractors who either get killed or injured in combat. And this Christmas it was kind of a rough Christmas because this last year we had three guys that were contractors that had killed themselves. One of them was in March. He'd had been diagnosed by the VA as 100% disabled for PTSD.
Right.
Or I call it PTS. It's not a disorder.
Sure.
It's a brain injury. But he had went into the VA, said that he was suicidal. I don't want to say that the VA did anything wrong because I don't know exactly what happened, but he never went home. And his wife eventually filed a report that he was missing. Cops gave identification of his truck. Cops found his truck, pulled up on it. When the cop that pulled up on it, he saw him. He was still alive. He saw the cop. Cop says, saw him in the mirror, and he took his life. Left a family of 5. Well, 6 with his wife. The youngest child was around Christmas time, was 18 months old. Jeez. The oldest was 16 years old. So we did a little thing where we just decided to have a Christmas party at our house. Me and my wife did, and all our neighbors in our area. We just said, hey, bring a present. This is what we're looking for to do. And it was pretty cool because by the time it was over, we had 2 big boxes of Christmas presents. The next day, everybody came over. We wrapped them, got them sent off. They got them by Christmas, and they got a Christmas because they didn't have enough money to have a Christmas. Because the problem that the family was experiencing was that, well, because he had PTS and it had been diagnosed by the VA, the DBA insurance said, hey, he got that when he was in the military.
Right.
The VA says, well, no, he's been contracting for like 5 years, so he probably got that from when he was contracting. So instead of solving the problem and helping somebody who needed help, they're going to get into the bureaucratic bullshit of who's responsible.
Passing the buck. Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. And it ended in, that's where I blame them both for the loss of his life. But for us, it was given a lot of people who had, our neighbors most of them, they know who I am, but they don't know about what contractors go through, and it kind of,
right.
It was cool to give them that part of helping. And we had one guy I know that's down in Texas. He his businesses, one of his businesses is building like monster trucks for people. And I called him up, and I'm like, because the 16-year-old has his dad's truck. Wants to get new tires and rims for it, has some electrical problems. It was a 2001, I think, F-150 or something like that.
Right.
And so I just called this guy up, and he said, and I'd only met this guy a week before, so I can't say he was a friend. But I called him up. I'm like, hey, here's the story. Is there anything you can do to help? And he's like, I'll FedEx you a check for $2,500. Give the kid $2,500 for a Christmas present. And it was pretty cool for me because I called him Christmas Day and said, I know we didn't get to give you a lot because we didn't have presents wrapped for him and stuff. And his mom was sitting there filming it and sent me the film. But she said, well, we're going to give you $2,500 to fix your dad's truck, which was cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Do you have any statistics on how many contractors have been wounded in the war in Afghanistan and Iraq?
Going through because most of that's only kept in Department of Labor, and it's hard to find out exact numbers. But since, and I caveat this with, when I say contractors with the U.S. government, some of them are private security contractors. Right. Some of them are third country nationals that work for the U.S. government overseas doing food service or maintenance or things like that. But approximately 30,000 contractors have been killed in 80 different countries, have been injured in 80 different countries since 2001.
Wow. And I don't know if a lot of people understand that, where the U.S. government does a substantial amount of work overseas, and it could be, when we look at internationally in all these different countries, it's not necessarily a war, right? It's they're contracting out specific services, and they're working in a country. And you do that in the time of war as well. In Iraq and Afghanistan, as Mark was mentioning, the private military security contractors or private military contractors, you had the guys that were carrying guns. Then you had cooks and laborers, and sometimes those were Americans, and then sometimes they were third country nationals, which is they're not American and they're not in the host country. They're a third country, right? So does that make sense? And when you break it down into that, you would have guys from like Nigeria and
Bangladesh,
loading trucks or something like that.
Nepalese. We had Hondurans, Nicaraguans.
Yeah.
I mean, there was Hondurans and Nicaraguans guarding the outer perimeter of the embassy in Baghdad.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So like when I think of contractor, I think of obviously what a lot of people that never served or don't know anything about it. Like I think of Blackwater, and I think of people riding around in trucks with guns. So the term contractor means exactly what it sounds like. You're contracting for the U.S. government in some capacity. So people contract directly with the U.S. government, and then people contract with private companies. The company contracts with the government, and then the people. What are those called? Contractors?
Yeah, you have basically you have two types. You have industrial contractors, or ICs. That's a company that bids on a contract with the U.S. government. Let's say it's Geist LLC. I bid on a contract, whether it's food service, security, whatever. I get the contract. I hire, depending on what it is, I hire the best people for that to fill that. Some of them may be third country nationals. I may hire a bunch of Nepalese if I'm doing food service or something like that, or building a road or something. I may also hire some that are LLNs or local nationals.
Right.
And then you have what we call direct contractors, and those are contractors who are contracted directly with the individual is contracted directly with the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Now it's making a lot more sense.
Sometimes you have a company, and sometimes there's no company in between you and the G, right? And as Mark was saying, you'd have a wide variety of nationalities that were represented in a war zone. So Iraq and Afghanistan, you would have Americans, Afghanis, and then you would have a wide variety of other countries that were represented. So when you think about a V-bed going off the front gate, you have to also think about, were those Americans, were those Nigerians, were they Colombians, were they, who knows? But there isn't an accurate number. When I say that, there is an accurate head count of how many American service members have been killed and injured. Yes. But there isn't an accurate number that I can think of that even exists as to the actual toll between the host country nationals that were working, or the local nationals, and the third party nationals, right? And then when you start looking at all of those combined, that's a more realistic picture as to what's going on. It's only telling one part of the story if we talk about, and it's granted, it's a very important part of the story as to the American service members, but it's only telling one aspect of it.
So it's a lot bigger picture than what we think.
It's much bigger than what we think.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time. I mean, obviously, I've spent over the past decade and a half. The majority of that, still to this day, was in Iraq or Afghanistan for me. So I've been done with this stuff for 4 years, but the majority of my life, my adult life, has always been working in these places. And it still bothers me to this day that there aren't institutes that ultimately are held accountable for tracking the actual number, because you have to get a better idea as to how many people are being killed and injured in order to have a more accurate representation to what's happening.
Well, that's interesting because there's a saying in business, that which gets counted gets managed. Yes. And how can you track, manage, facilitate, make changes, make effective changes, effective management, if you don't know the total number?
You don't, and each company that gets that contract, I mean, a lot of times, most times, that individual company is the one who is responsible or takes that responsibility on their own to to do that. You know, I mean, and some of them did it real well. You know, from all I know with like Blackwater in the early days, I mean, Blackwater had set up a great program and managed and helped their guys get through the DBA process. But that's because they chose to take care of their guys. And a lot of that had to do with the guy that owned that company, because he came from the community and he knew what it meant to take care of your guys. Some of the other ones, you know, because some of these companies that had security were from, I mean, they were third country nationals. They could have been from, and when I say third country national company, could have been from Australia, from South Africa, could have been a company that was out of England, something like that. I mean, and how they, you know, there's no industry standard that really says, okay, you have to take care of how you have to take care of your guys.
It sounds a little bit like the NFL, you know, like once the guys play the game and then they get out and it's like, hey, man, I know you got some head injuries, but are you sure you got it from playing football? It's like, no, you're right. You're right. Ramming my head into another human being's head for 10 years, that had nothing to do with what's wrong with me.
Well, I don't think, for me, when I look at it, and I think that is really close. And I think what happens, and, you know, I've spent a significant amount of time thinking about this, where, you know, you'll get out of the military, or you'll be going to get out, and you're, you know, for me, you'll be looking at, what am I going to do, right? What am I going to do? For a lot of guys, especially coming from our former office, like the CIA has a specific amount of allure, right? And, well, I'm motivated to go do something that's a little bit more clandestine, you know, cool. So they'll leverage that secrecy in order to put people in very high threat level jobs to fill the holes. And then they have to do it with companies because they don't know how to recruit people very well. And they'll do this, you know, expansion of personnel. And two, they can. Once they're not working, they're not working. So it's a cost. It saves money to the USG. It increases their recruitment. And it solves a lot of different problems. And they're a necessity to, you know, they really are a necessity to, I truly believe, national security as far as like the contractors. Now, how they treat contractors and the ethical responsibility of conflict as far as the American service member deploys, or the Americans and their ethical responsibility to the men and women that they send overseas, that's a whole other story, which is, yeah, you sign up to be a paramilitary contractor. You do. You sign up and you're like, got it. But nobody's sitting there when you're signing up to do it going, hey guys, and by the way, your health coverage is going to be paid by us. If you get fucked up, your insurance is going to be a nightmare. You're going to have to fight for every fucking tooth and, you know, fight for anything and everything that you get. You're like, I work for the government. I came out of the military. Like, so what if it's a different paycheck? So what if it's a different classification? Nobody's giving you a class on the difference between what is a 1099 and a W-2, and what are those, and what are the differences, and what can those differences mean in your life? Nobody's doing that. In all actuality, they're doing it in the reverse. They're saying, this is actually better. You're treated as an employee. Yep. You're part of the, you know, the strategic effort. You're going to be put into these great positions. And oh, by the way, you can set your schedule and, you know, do all these great things. You're going to make a little bit more money. They're not telling you, oh, but if you get fucked up, you're going to have to go through mountains of fucking paperwork. You're going to have to do, you know, bend over backwards to get something that's rightfully yours. Because in all actuality, if we wouldn't be in the country of Iraq or Afghanistan, this injury wouldn't exist. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so imagine getting ready to go to work. Your first trip, you're going to head over. So You went through your train up or your evaluation. You made it all the way through, and okay, you're going to get deployed. Okay, you got to go buy an airplane ticket. That's okay. Oh, by the way, it's got to be a first class ticket because when you hit the ground, you got to be ready to go to work. I don't think a first class ticket to anywhere in the world is less than about $8,000.
Right.
Mostly around 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, you have to pay for your insurance premiums for DBA, Defense Base Act. Okay, how much is that? At the time I got injured, it was $15,000 for 2 months. Okay. So for me to go to work, I had to, if I bought a first class ticket and I had to pay all my premiums, I spent $25,000 to go to work. Now,
you guys are serious right now? Are you playing
serious? Yeah. Now, the government reimburses you for that premium, and they reimburse you for, because per the contract, they're going to reimburse you for your travel and all of that. But how many people have 25? You just come out of the military, and you are going to go work for the U.S. government as a contractor. How many people have $25,000 in the bank?
Probably not a lot.
I mean, how many people have an American Express card with $25,000 credit limit?
Those that have just come out of the military, probably zero.
Not very many.
And you find a way to do it because, you know what, I want to go do that. That's, I mean, and a lot of it's just I want to go serve. I want to go be with the guys that I've served with before. I want that. I mean, I want to be a part of something. I want to continue my career being a part of something bigger than just myself.
Well, and a lot of guys use it too as a foot in the door. Like, hey, I want to go to work over there, so I'm going to use this as a foot in the door. Say, I want to, get a clearance and do all these things and start my professional career path because, and this is a road where they need more people, and I'm going to be able to put my foot in there, and a lot of times that works. That absolutely does work, but. Nobody's really, and a lot of these contracts too, like there's recruitments and things like that go out, but definitely where Mark and I were, a lot of it was word of mouth. Mm-hmm. Like, hey dude, why don't you come to work for us? And okay, yeah, when you're like, hey, why don't you come to work for us? And you're like, hey, you're going to go to work for the agency. You're like, oh, that's fucking badass. For me, it was 20 something years old. Like, wow. And I'd just done the invasion with a group of guys from the CIA. They were like the coolest dudes on the planet. This sounds great. And by no means am I a victim in this story. I'm just telling you, like, this sounds great. This sounds great. I didn't know the differences in the divisions or what even office I was working in when I went to work for the fucking clown show. Didn't know. Like, they, you forfeit basically your name, and then you say that it's like, here's my, my call sign, and you go to work and you learn on the job, like what it's all about, who's who in the zoo, how's the whole fucking thing put together. You don't know enough about employment law to read through a contract. And oh, by the way, these were the cool things. Is like, here's your contract. You can't take it home with you. So you can't take it and have like an attorney go through it. You can't redline it. You have to sign it right there. And then they take it away and you don't see it again. You don't even know what you signed.
Would you change a thing? Would you do it again?
Would I do it again? Like all of it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, hindsight, it's always 2020, right? And I don't think so.
Really?
No, I would have stayed in. When I started early on, the wars, they kept on saying the wars were going to be over. Literally in Iraq, it was like, we're going to be out of here anytime, folks, and so you had to go, like you didn't want to come back from deployment because you're afraid, like, I'm going to miss this bitch. Like, it's going to be gone.
Like, I remember you and Jeff telling stories that y'all were, like, panicking, like, thinking, like, this thing's going to last about 100 hours. Let's hurry the fuck up. Here we are 20 years later.
Yeah, seriously, dude. So, like, thinking back on it, it's like, no, if I had to do it over again, I don't believe in regret or any of these things. If I had to do it over again, I would have taken the advice of somebody that was much senior to me, who was already in the agency at that time. He said, "Go to Delta Selection, go there."
You'd have kept going. You'd have just gone a different path.
Yeah, I would have stayed in the mill side, not the civilian side.
What about you?
Well, and I mean, because my story is a little bit different.
Your story is fascinating.
I was in the Marine Corps from 84 to 96. I got out of the Marine Corps. I went into law enforcement. I did that.
Hold on. Everyone pay attention, because I got a taste of this before we started recording, and this is really fascinating to me. This is one of the more interesting paths I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of paths.
So you want me to go, you want details about my military career, kind of?
Yeah, and then get into the stuff about the job with it.
Right. So when I joined the Marine Corps when I was 18 years old. Actually, when I was getting ready to turn 18, December of 1983. So my military background, or my family, I had a grandfather that was in World War II, had 5 Purple Hearts, Silver Star, Bronze Star. He was my hero. He's the guy that I looked up to. And I had 3 uncles, 2 in the Navy and 1 in the Marine Corps. And so I was raised about love of country and all of that. So I was walking down the hall my senior year with a good friend of mine, my best friend, and we were supposed to be going to math class. It was just after lunch, I think it was, and he kept walking past math class and said, I'm like, "Where the hell are you going?" He's like, "I'm going to go see the recruiter." I'm like, "Dude, I can get out of math class and go do that?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I'm with you." So I went down to the recruiter, and this dude saw me coming from a mile away. He's like, "Yep. What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Dude, I want to shoot things, blow things up, jump out of airplanes, all that stuff." He's like, "You know what? We have a job for someone like you. It's called the infantry." And joined the Marine Corps 10 days after high school. Was after I graduated, went to boot camp. And
what year?
1984. And I loved it. I did. I don't regret it. Most of the time, I don't know if I remember all the times I was sitting there either shining boots, cleaning my gun, or doing field day. You remember all the fun stuff, but I'd probably do. You're part of something bigger than yourself, and so I did that. I was in the infantry, did a few deployments. Was stationed in the Philippines for a while. Come back, I transferred to a job that was a counterterrorism, anti-terrorism instructor. Did that for about 3 years, and then my last 5-6 years, I was an interrogator translator. Went through school to learn all that. Language school, interrogation school, and then got ready to start deploying. And me and my first wife adopted our first child, and I didn't want any of that to. I knew what my schedule was and how it was going to be, so I got out and went and joined law enforcement. Worked my ass off, more hours than I probably should have in law enforcement. Got divorced anyways, but I did. I worked for a sheriff's department, and really in one of the jobs I probably enjoyed the most, and most people probably don't like it and don't understand it, but I worked crimes against children and crimes against women.
Yeah, we chatted about that briefly before we started recording. I'm glad we're talking about it. I didn't want to hear it, but I'm glad I did. Mm-hmm. And from people that I know that work in jobs for agencies, that there is an opportunity to go into that field. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing you can stand up and say, I this isn't for me. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't handle it. So it's not quitting, but that's the one thing. So the crimes against children and stuff. And you shared some stories about that, which were quite shocking. So you were saying about prosecuting, and you had a skill interrogating children. Yep. Can you touch on that?
Well, it's forensic interviewing. It's being able to find. There's a way, because with the thing with kids is it's easy to lead kids. The younger they are, it's easy to inadvertently or advertently lead kids down the wrong path of what they're trying to say. Most people, if it's done, that end up doing it wrong, do it inadvertently. It's not like they're trying to get them to say something, because who would ever want to get a kid to say basically some of the worst things that have ever happened to him if it wasn't true? But the defense is going to exploit any chance of that. I made it my goal to make sure that any kid I interviewed, there was no way they could, it was beyond reproach. I videotaped it so they could, hey, you want to watch it? Show me where I messed up. And they can't, because that was just the way I approached it. And because my thing was about, I want to do an investigation to find the truth. And I am the person that is not necessarily the voice of the child, but the voice of justice. Because the truth is what matters, not the allegation. Because anybody can make an allegation, true, false, whatever, but you have to be able to find that way to do that. And, I went through a lot of training to do that. And I mean, I hate to say like I enjoyed it, but I did, because it allowed me to make sure that no child had to tell that story again. And, but then with my interrogation background in the Marine Corps, I mean, my same thing was with the perps, is I'm going to make sure that, I get a solid interrogation that's beyond reproach. And if I could get somebody, if they would start talking to me, I always got a confession. The only ones that if they don't say nothing, it's hard to break those. But, and I never had a case go to trial, I don't think. They all pled out because they knew they were dead to rights. I got a lot of satisfaction in that.
How many years were you in law enforcement?
About 6 years.
Okay.
I did that for 3, and then I left. I took a job as chief of police in a small town near where I grew up. Eastern Colorado it was like Mayberry. 1,260 people, plus or minus 60 people, or 30 people for 100 years. Older retirement community kids, the high school kids. The worst thing they pretty much did is either drag race up and down Main Street, drink beer, and throw it up on top of the grocery store roof or whatever.
Right.
Never really had any major crime, and it was cool though, because you got to do that other part of law enforcement where you could make another difference in people's lives. Just in a different way, more of a benign way, but you still got to do that.
And so you transition from law enforcement to, what'd you do right after that?
Well, me and city council kind of had a disagreement on how law enforcement should be enforced. I figure that it's fair across the board. If I'm going to give somebody a break, I'm going to give everybody that same break, or at least have that opportunity. Had an individual that was on city council that disagreed with that, and so I felt it was in my best interest to find another avenue before we went head to head. And so I started my own business doing private investigations and bounty hunting, and did that for about 3 years in Pueblo, Colorado. I had a blast doing that. And
Pueblo, Colorado, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Pueblo is an interesting town.
Yeah.
Got a lot of elements in there and a lot of bad elements. And, it was fun. Yeah, it was.
What was fun about it? Like,
well, it's. A lot of it's the bounty hunting side of it is. As a bounty hunter, your job is to, somebody skips bail, there's a warrant out, you go get a copy of that warrant, and you get to go hunt them down.
Right.
You get to track them down, hunt them down. You develop your assets. A lot of the stuff that carried off into what I did next as a contractor, especially where I ended up. You're developing assets. You're developing. You're driving in areas where it's all gang activity.
Right.
If you don't make sure you're not being followed, things like that, they're looking for you. And so, out west, at least in Colorado, I'll speak to that mainly. Is if I have a warrant for somebody and it's his house and I know the house is in his name, legally I can kick that door in 10 times a day.
Wow.
And to check that if he's there. If it's his mom's house, I can't do that, or his sister's. But if I see him go in, I can just go kick the door down.
As a bail bondsman, or right?
Well, there's bail bondsmen and bounty hunters.
Got it.
If you're certified as a bail bondsman, you're certified, as a bounty hunter.
Got it.
But you could also be a bounty hunter without being a bail bondsman.
Okay.
So,
Well, so wasn't dog in Colorado, which is stupid. But I got to
say,
ask.
I knew
that.
you guys were going to go down that road.
So that's your inspiration, huh?
That's my inspiration. No.
You were way before that, but wasn't he in Colorado?
Yeah, he was in Colorado, did a lot up in Denver area, and in Colorado Springs area. He was a unique individual. I mean, and me as a bounty hunter, I mean, I don't like to get into fights. Every time I've ever been in a fight in my life, I've gotten hurt as well.
Right.
Whether I win or lose, I'm kind of more of a, I guess you'd say, a tactician. I mean, I knew the cops that patrolled the area where I was looking. Cops get hungry when they're on shift late at night. Buy them a pizza and a soda.
Right.
Hey, if you see this guy, call me.
Right.
Okay. They're not doing nothing, or if they're not doing nothing, they keep an eye out for you. If I go in, they're my backup.
Right.
I just, I make those. It's about relationships. So
what made you at that point though? Like, what made you transition and go? Because did you go over to Baghdad on your first like?
Yeah.
So how did that? Like, what was your transition thinking? Like, man, okay, I'm going to go do this, and why?
And I don't really. So, in 1999, I joined the Army National Guard.
Okay.
I was with 19th Group.
Right.
I was there for 2 years, or 99, 2000, 2001, almost 3 years.
Right.
And I mean, I don't talk about it because there was nothing to it.
Right.
I mean, it was fun. I got to go do a lot of jumps. We jumped out of airplanes, Yeah. 9/11 hit. 19th Group is based. The headquarters is based out of Denver, Colorado area.
Right.
And it was just. I think a lot of that was just having that teamwork kind of thing back into that. And
Right.
it was local. I could still be and do the work I was doing without having to be full time. Mm-hmm. But when 9/11 hit, I mean, I knew I had to get back into it. And
Right.
19th Group was getting ready to deploy. Now, I hadn't been through selection or anything like that, so I was just a Marine grunt. And
Right.
they're getting ready to deploy, so I went up to the CO. Had went ahead to Bragg to set up pre-deployment training. Right. XO was there, and they were getting everybody ready, and I walked up to him. I'm like, so I was an E6. I was a staff sergeant.
Right.
Hey, am I going to get a go with you guys? He's like, well, no. I'm like, well, why not? He's like, well, you're not MOS qualified. I'm like, MOS qualified? I've got like 5 MOSs out of the Marine Corps. He says,
Right.
Yeah, but you ain't been to no schools for the Army. I'm like, okay. You understand that I speak the language of the country we're going to go to war with. I speak Farsi, which is,
Right.
Kabul Farsi is one of the languages they speak in Afghanistan.
Right.
He's like, doesn't matter. That ain't what the book says, and that ain't how we're going to do it. He's one of those guys. I mean, I'm like, okay, well, then I guess I don't want to go to war with you since you're going to do that because you're going to get people killed that you shouldn't get killed. And I was like 3 months from getting out. I was going to re-enlist to do that, and so I quit. And I guess I quit. I just finished my tour,
Right.
and that's 2001. That's about when I started. I was working on my own as an investigator, private investigator, and doing all that, and so I started exploring other ways to get into the war, and I knew that I wanted to go through the right company, and I wasn't going
Right.
to. There was a lot of Custer's Battle, and
Ooh, yeah.
some of those companies just were way out there, and so I researched and found Triple Canopy was one. I knew that they were hiring guys that were all. If you weren't pretty much at the top of your game, you weren't going to get hired on by them. And
Right. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Triple Canopy was started by a group of former CAG guys, and they had quite an impressive history. And the people, when they wanted to go contracting, it was you're going to go to Triple Canopy. And the other thing to that was they were one of the only guys that had a selection process that was intimidating to people. You would hear about it like, oh, well, I hear that's very difficult. Like, so it was interesting back then. They had a stellar reputation, a difficult selection, and so guys wanted to go just to see if they could make it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what, and I knew if I'm going to go to war or go do that, I want to be with the guys that I know are at the top of their game.
So when you say their selection was difficult, like, was it like a week long? Was it like a month long? Are you allowed to even disclose that? I mean, was it physical? Was it,
Yes, to all of those.
Okay.
I mean, you had to be at the top of your game shooting. You had to be at the top of your game driving. You had to be the physical fitness. I mean, it was all inclusive. And it wasn't like you were going there for training. So you're not going in there to be trained. You're going in there to be evaluated. It wasn't like going to, it was 100% evaluation. You get there, this is the standard. If you don't meet that standard, it's not like you get a second chance.
So just because you had done it on your DD-214, that didn't matter. They want to know, could you do it that day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I think almost all of the instructors were guys that had already been downrange. They'd come back either from downrange in the military, downrange as contractors. 85, 90% of them were probably all CAG guys. The attitude they took was, you're either going to make the standard or you're not. And if you're not, it's no disgrace to you. It's just, you're not going to be hired by us. You can go work for somebody else, because we're not going to have less than this. And that's what they stood to. So, and it was difficult, but it was good. You better be able to shoot.
Yeah, they had a reputation of having the highest shooting standards in the industry at that time. Because I knew guys that were like getting out and going over to Blackwater and Triple Canopy and a lot of these companies, and I was still with still either on active duty or like I had like several months of an injury that I was rehabilitating, so I was under G orders. So but they definitely had this reputation. And then within the contracting community, you had different contracts where guys were like, oh, that's a good contract, or that's a bad contract, or that's a dangerous contract, or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But typically the highest amount of money was paid out for the not even necessarily the most dangerous work, but it was the most selective. So if you had X amount of skill and you could make it through the more difficult selection process, you would be paid more because you're worth more, just straight up.
What was a big, like, are you allowed to share any of the information, like, when this is going on, like, the most qualified guys? Like, give me a range, like, what those dudes were making a day during, like, the heyday.
Dude, on the heyday, I'm trying to think back. On the heyday, guys were making, like, $1,500 a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
So you're an E6, right? E6, $4,000 a month, right? Give or take. And you're looking across going, these guys are doing the same job, if not maybe a little bit less dangerous, more dangerous, give or take. I'm getting paid $4,000, and you guys are getting paid $45,000 a month, right? Well, recruiting's not that hard when you're doing that.
One is greater than zero.
Yeah, because guys are like, fuck, man, I could bang out like 90 days, put a nice little Easter egg in the bank, and then, hey, you know what? I'll go find something else to do,
So
that was the intention, at least.
That was the intention.
So let me ask you this, Mark. So it sounds like you had some like intellectual qualifications. Like it doesn't sound like you had like the operational skill set, and I don't mean that as an insult.
No, totally. I had to fight my way. So I had to fight my way into. I guess fight my way. I would say I'm persistent. If I want something, I'm going to get it. I called up the recruiter to Triple Canopy, and I emailed him my resume. And they called, hey, we were talking, and they're like, hey, your resume looks good, but you've been out of it for a while. You haven't been operational, from their viewpoint. You haven't been operational. You haven't been in the fight. There's a lot of guys coming out of the military. These guys are the ones we want. Da. And I'm like, well, crap, and I kind of okay. So what am I going to do? I'm like, and I was thinking about it overnight, and I'm like, screw this. They're full of shit. I'm like, with what you're doing, the contract was to protect State Department personnel. So I called the guy back up the next day, and I'm like, you know what? I think you're wrong. He's like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, first off, okay, I've been operational every day as a cop for the last 9 years. I mean, and as a cop, I've worked with the scum of the earth, and I've worked with, as a chief of police, I've dealt with politicians and the governor and all of that. We're dealing with State Department, right? He's like, well, yeah. I'm like, so I think you want somebody who can also shoot and also have the ability to understand the nuances with the get along to go along kind of thing with State Department personnel. You don't want somebody that's just a knuckle dragger. And I just kind of went off on all of that and kind of explained why I thought I was more qualified than most people. And he says, you know what? I hadn't thought about it like that. Let me call you back in an hour. I'm going to talk to my team. He hung up. I'm like, okay, well, I don't expect to hear a call back, but he said he'd call me back. So after about half an hour, I'm an impatient bastard. I called him back. I'm like, so have you made a decision or not? He's, you know what? We haven't thought of it like that. And I speak Farsi, which I can read it and write it at that time, especially. He's like, you know what? You bring something that we don't get out of the average guy here coming out of the military. And so I just fought my way into it.
How was your shooting compared to the other guys?
I was good. I mean, it's the one thing I brag. I'm a good shot. I've always been a good shot.
But how did you get to, like, I wouldn't think that law enforcement, you would shoot as much as guys that were coming back from deployment or coming out of the military.
Well, and remember back, I mean, in 2001, not everybody in the military carried a pistol, for one. So when I was in the Marine Corps, when I was I was a firearms instructor from 85 till I got out. I taught a lot of that, and I got to shoot a lot. I love to shoot. I mean, I would shoot 1,000 rounds a week.
Oh, so you shot recreationally and training and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean,
you weren't doing like the bare minimum qualifications to maintain. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
got you.
I used to, because I'm left-handed. I used to shoot pistol left-handed, and I got tired of teaching it left-handed because most people you teach right. So I taught myself to shoot right-handed, just so it's easier to teach. So I could shoot left-handed, I could shoot right-handed. Especially with a pistol, either one. I mean, and I don't mean this by bragging, but I know I can shoot.
No, you're not bragging. You're just answering my question.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No. So they call you and they say, "Hey, man, come on down here and let's take a look."
Yeah, and I mean, the shooting part was the easiest part for me.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, but where I'm coming from with that is like I'm thinking of LEO, and I would not think that LEO guys shoot as much as
most. The majority of law enforcement officers probably if they only shoot a lot if that's something they love to do.
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, they don't get paid to train.
Right.
In most cases, they have to a qualification level. They meet that, and that's it. And most of it's pretty simple. At least it was then. It's they're trying to change it, but they deal with finances. I mean,
what was the hardest part? In the moment, I don't mean now looking back. I mean like when you were going through it, what was the challenging part?
I mean, I'm not sure, because like the driving part was pretty easy, because as law enforcement, I mean, you go through driving schools. So I'd been through a couple driving schools in law enforcement, so that made it a lot easier than everybody else. Or I don't know about everybody else, but it was easier for me at least.
Yeah,
I think I don't know. Go ahead.
No, the driving stuff, like that's a good point. Like I would go through, driving courses, and the LEO guys would do way more driving. They would do way more driving tactics. They were just better drivers. And Troy, great example. We were going through, and I was like, dude, you're incredible driving. He's like, yeah, I taught driving for the Virginia State Police for several years. Like, he taught driving. So, of course, he was a badass driver. But guess what? When we rotated downrange, he was driving, I was navigating, because he wasn't the greatest navigator. So, like...
Yeah, and that's what I mean. The whole thing, it's the military or that community thing in general. But with contracting, I mean, it's putting the guys that have the skill sets together that complement each other the best in the right positions, and letting them go do what they do best.
This concludes part 1 of 2 of our conversation with Mark Geist.